Hello, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining on this beautiful Friday. Seth, I'm in Atlanta. Where are you logging in
I'm
from?
in I'm in Central Florida.
Oh, so we're neighbors.
Pretty close, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I would also like to know where our viewers are watching from. So put that in the chat where you are watching from. And I would love for you all to tag someone in this video. We're going to get in deep and we're not going to waste any time, because how many times in your life can you say that you have worked or heard from someone who believes in navigating your spiritual, your sexuality, your physical, your emotional, all at the same time? Not many. This is my first time speaking to a holistic wellness coach, someone who really truly believes in talking about it all, from a non-judgmental approach. So Seth, how did you get into this work?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I became a multidimensional coach by following my passions and my curiosities for my entire life. That's truly like the secret to my success is whatever I was interested in, I wanted to know it at the highest degree possible. So as a child, I was always a spiritual seeker, wanted to understand how the world worked. So I studied systems and philosophy and really got to the root of that. Then I was always an athlete. So I wanted to obviously have the best body possible, which led me to getting my master's in physiology and becoming a strength and conditioning coach. And then, as a spiritually seeker, I dove into a bunch of different modalities, yoga, meditation, other spiritual practices, eventually becoming an interspiritual minister. Regarding sex and sexuality, as I was working with people, as a trainer and a life coach and kind of a synthesis of all these different modalities, the one common theme that came up for everybody behind closed doors involved sex and sexuality. Yet in our culture, it is not talked about very much at all. And if it is talked about, it's usually hyper sexualized and kind of cartoonized a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and I realized how much of cultural and individual suffering comes from having a disconnection to sex and sexuality from who they are on their inside versus the outward appearance that people have. So I wanted to also get to the root of understanding that. And that led me to becoming both a Tantra practitioner, educator, and a sexologist. So I weave all of those things together into what I call multidimensional coaching.
What type of clients do you work with? Like what are, if they're presenting issues, like when they come to you, what are they seeking?
Lately, most of my clients are coming to me with some form of trauma that they've been holding on to for decades. I mean, multiple decades in a lot of cases. We define trauma, or a way that we define trauma is any emotion, event, or experience that isn't able to be processed in the body. And
Mm-hmm.
if you really think about that hard enough, you start to realize how all of these conscious and even unconscious events or emotions that have been stuck in the body, in your body, start to manifest and show up in toxic behaviors and
Mm-hmm.
patterns that you continuously cycle through. So the people that I work with are people who are starting to recognize, oh, this is not normal. And there are things at my core that I need to straighten out and metabolize and move through. And are ready to do that work, because it's not
Mm-hmm.
always easy. Working with me is not, the end is always the best life for you possible. But to get there, you got to kind of go into the shadows and do some work.
It's work. I mean,
Yeah.
even holding a mirror to people for them to see that what they have been through, generational cycles, is not normal. And people have a very hard time with just accepting that, even though it's been happening, even though you've been doing it for so long, doesn't mean it's normal. And then you've got people around them who normalize the behavior, to continue the cycle. And so ultimately, they have to sift through to
Exactly.
see what relationships, as they heal and as they grow, what relationships are beneficial and what relationships are not. So while you're moving them along, when do you start to see, self-esteem, self-worth? Like like how long does it take for like that to start becoming exposed?
Maybe it's a little sneaky on my end, because I do an intake session where I ask them about 10 different areas or dimensions of their life, and I ask them to give me like a rating, and then to talk about it. And then I have some somatic tools that I use to get them to feel about it as well and see what kind of surfaces there. So by the time I'm done with that intake session, somebody might be like, I'm a 9 in this department. And then as they start talking, it's like, oh no, that's actually like, I would give it a 3. This person
Mhm.
clearly has like some narcissistic traits, that maybe we need to look into. Or on the other side, a lot of people might be like, I'm a 2, I'm this and that, I'm awful, I'm this, I'm that. And then as I start talking to them, I'm like, actually, I'd put you around an 8, and I need to obviously address this person's self-esteem. So little my onboarding process helps me sift through and navigate, kind of get a better sense of where they are than they even realize.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems to pop up with myself and my clients when they discuss the types of relationships they're in, right? So people who are in toxic relationships or cycles where, they know that the relationship is no longer serving them, but they're still in the relationship, or people who describe childhood abuse and abandonment, I automatically wonder if
Mhm.
if those relationships have had an impact
Yeah.
on their self-esteem and self-worth. Okay.
Yeah.
Just so that we're operating off of the same definition, how do you view self-worth? Like what is that to you?
Self-worth to me is knowing who you are at your core, knowing your values, knowing your vision for the life you want to be leaving, and then being able to advocate for that
Yes.
without harming other people.
Yes. And I think people often get self-esteem and self-worth
Mm,
confused. In my opinion, self-esteem can be swayed by what's going on in your life. It can be very situational. So you get a promotion, self-esteem shoots up, you are getting to an argument and people call you names and you internalize it, self-esteem can lower. Whereas self-worth, I agree with you, is kind of like an internal belief about yourself. Okay, the reason why we needed that working operational definition is because we are going to talk about a situation from a non-judgmental approach, but the situation is between Jennifer Williams and Christian Gold. And we're not going to spend all of our time on this, but it sets the scene of where we're going. So if you don't know anything about Basketball Wives or these two people, I'm going to give you the overall assumption, right? And the overall accusations. None of this has been proven as true. So you have a boss, definition of a boss. So a woman who is very successful, beautiful, talented, driven, motivated. And she is in relationship and has been in past relationships with men who might be self-seeking. Okay. In whatever way that is, self-seeking. Okay. And so some of these relationships have ended in heartache and pain for her. The optics are, open your eyes. Why don't you see the red flags that might be flashing in front of you? And so I truly believe that I don't necessarily believe that we attract negative people. I don't believe that we walk around and like we're magnets. I don't, not in the sense of like A plus B equals C, right? But I do believe that what we intentionally seek, what we value, what we believe are standards do influence the quality of our relationships, right? So how do you encourage, or how do you navigate helping people in these type of relationships improve their self-worth? So like, what do you think about the situation with Jennifer and Christian, and then what does that look like in real life?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And I got to do a deep dive into the situation, which was enlightening and really, really fun. And I mentioned the unconscious before, and I think to talk about this without talking about our unconscious attractors. I get we're not attracting negative people, but we are attracting what has been modeled to us throughout our lifetime. So whatever, childhood, what I don't know Jennifer Williams' childhood story to know how her parental dynamic was and what she started to associate as like healthy dynamics. But clearly she's a boss, and clearly
Mhm.
she's built, I'm going to say empire, that might be a little strong, but she's clearly built something. But for whatever reason, she is attracted to a certain person. And if you look at
Mhm.
her previous spouses, from Eric Williams on, there's obviously attractive, and um, but there's also a level of a lack of integrity within the men she's bringing in. So something in her unconscious is attracted to, I don't want to say the bad boy, but like the
Mhm.
with a little bit of an
Mhm.
edge there. And but yeah, regarding worth, it's all about, again, knowing who you are and knowing who you want to be. And I do feel like within Jennifer Williams, there is a little bit of incongruency of the boss kind of empire that she's built, and then the men that she's bringing in, which
Mhm.
is something that she needs to, look in the mirror and figure out what it is. And clearly, clearly she wants to be a sexy couple, right? Like clearly she wants some arm candy. I mean, I was
Mhm.
reading about the wedding that they're planning, and
Mhm.
it just feels like there's so much more substance over depth in the relationship. So it feels like,
Mhm.
so to answer your question, I feel like her priorities might be out of whack regarding, she wants more of a partner to elevate her status of, here's a hot, successful, which is questionable in Chris
Mhm.
Old's
Uh-huh.
case,
Mhm.
person, to help strengthen her empire. But she doesn't even realize she doesn't need a man to do that. And the reality is to me, her success in business would be even better to kick somebody like him to the curb
Mhm.
and show the world, like, I don't need anybody else to be top level boss.
Right. Oh, you nailed that. Oh my goodness, you nailed that. What do you see, because you have worked with some high status people, right? Um, Getting people to go deeper,
Yeah.
because the world will say that success is money, power, fame. And if you're not careful, you drink the Kool-Aid, right? And you start to believe that.
Yeah.
So, like, going deeper with people who to the outside world seem shallow, how do you get people to let you in, and to that mask that we're talking about? And I work with a lot of narcissistic people who identify with having the traits, and people
Mm.
who are in relationships with people with the traits. So that mask, getting them to take that mask off and go a little bit
Yeah.
deeper.
Yeah, beautiful. And I love the mask. I use persona in my language, but you talk about money, success, fame, and all I hear are none of those are real. Any one of those
Mhm,
things could be taken away from a person. And then what are you when those things
mhm,
aren't yours anymore? So for me, tying it again to self-worth, it's knowing who you are in a way it's unbreakable. It's a foundation that can't be taken away. And I have
mhm,
very visceral memories of walking out of billionaire clients' homes and just looking at nature and being like, I am so glad I am who I am, because
mm,
my worth comes from me and how I show up in the world, my integrity, how I treat people. And I would, walk out of these billionaires' houses who I would watch abuse staff in front of me, not even realizing that like I'm technically staff as, their trainer, their coach would have, like I was on the higher end of that pecking order, but still, so really
hired help, right?
I'm a higher up than this
Yeah.
person, but I'm still on the staff level ship. But really it's developing your integrity, your knowing how you're making people around you better, knowing how you're using your privilege to make the world a better place. Those are the types of things that truly, little by little, build up self-worth. And I know as you're asking the question, I very specifically remember a client a little bit earlier on in my career that was like, man, I got to tell you, I was debating between working with you and knowing what that would cost and buying a new set of rims for my Range Rover. Like that was like the debate. Am I going to work with this guy or get like 22s, right? And after working with me for like that 12 session container, he's like, I cannot, like I lost weight. I feel better. Like it's so silly to even think that I was debating that, 3 months ago. And that to me is like the biggest, like just such a great testimonial. Like, yeah, those rims are going to be, when it comes to external factors to bring validation in, I liken it to light before it goes out. You get a new purse, you get a new rims, you feel great, and that's like the light is the brightest before it goes out. Because then after that initial excitement, the next day, 2 days later, a week later, the bill comes in. The credit card bill comes in, and it's like, oh wait, and then it's this up and down, and the downs are way deeper and longer than those highs. But when you get clear, I know I keep saying on your values, but when you know who you are and you begin to embody it and show up in the world with those values, with that level of integrity, man, it is so much better than any purse, any rims, and it shows in how you carry yourself in the world.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I didn't always know who I was, and I was confused. I knew my values, but they could be swayed depending on who, what, when, how, right? And I think there are people watching who, when they hear words like self-worth, it feels like big and out there. Like they don't know how to make it feel authentic to themselves, especially if you've had people tell you who you should be, what you should be, what you should believe. Then you really don't know yourself because you've been crafted, you've been molded into the person that you are. And it really takes I love working with like my 20-year-olds, like that 20 to 25, because that's when you can see like their eyes opening and them wanting to discover who they are and what they believe. And I think that's such a pivotal moment, because if you don't explore your values, what you believe for yourself, then you'll be 40, 50 years old, still allowing the world to define you. And so, yeah, that's really important. Yeah. So what about boundaries? Like, how does, like, let's say that you are trying to formulate your values and your boundaries. Where would you suggest people start?
Beautiful. Yeah, really beautiful. And where to start? Actually, I would start at the deepest core. So the way that I like to think about that is, if you've ever held a newborn baby in your hands, that is the purest being possible. I'm talking about like maybe they have a name at this point, but there's nothing in the way between that baby and its pure soul. And granted, we need to function in the world, so you're given a name. As soon as we get a name, I call that the relative self makes a bubble around that pure soul. And then as life starts to happen, little things, your mom telling you, oh, you're eating that, you maybe you're a little heavy. These are little things that I call traumas that build up over time that begin to block us from that pure being inside of us. And when we lose connection to that, which most people do, you know, like a 20-year-old has a closer connection to that because they haven't had their 20s beat them up yet, you know.
Mhm.
But we're looking for connection to that being, to that pure self inside of us. And we go looking for it in external places, not reading that what we're looking for already resides inside of us. So
Mhm.
as we begin to get clear on all of the things, the micro things and the macro things, the little things that build up over time, as well as the big traumas that block us from that pure self, as we get clear on what those things are, we begin to remember who we really are. And
Mhm.
as you begin to remember who you really are, you will not put up with any bullshit from anybody. And you get better at communicating who you are and how you will continue to show up in the world. And as you become a better communicator, to touch into your own needs, desires, values, you can begin to communicate those with other people, which in my opinion is the best way to put up a boundary with the gate, right? We're not necessarily shutting people out completely, but we're letting people know, like, these are my rules for my self-worth, for my integrity. And if you want to be inside here, you know, you
Yeah.
better use the gate and wipe your feet on the way
Mhm. When
in.
you talked about like those micro, what did you call them? Micro traumas? What did you
Yeah.
say? Yeah.
I used to call it lowercase t and capital T case
Okay.
T traumas,
Okay.
but that some people felt like that implied the smaller ones aren't as
It's
important
not
as the
as
bigger
big.
ones.
Okay.
Yeah. But you could call it like the subtle chronic ones, you know, the
Okay.
nitpicking from, yeah.
What do you think the impact of a coming out of a toxic relationship or being in a toxic relationship, like how do you think that impacts us
Hmm.
spiritually, emotionally, physically, and
Yeah.
our ability to then I just some people, and I don't know if it's a some people are born with it or some people are just have the ability to persevere and move forward and look and say that will never happen to me again versus the people who get in this loop and want to repeat the cycle so that they can somehow fix it the next time, you know. So tell me about like the toxic relationships and that impact.
Yeah, and it's so funny you said it that way, because when I was really studying up on Jennifer Williams and her past relationships, I was like, oh, my clinical intuition is she on a level knows these men are not up to her standards, but for
Mhm.
whatever reason, she has like the hero complex of like, but I could fix this person. You know, so that
Ooh.
itself becomes its own. I mean, that's another interview, right? But
Yeah.
that's a common theme of people in toxic relationships thinking they're going to be the one to fix them. And that's the thing with toxic relationships is the person coming out of the abuse, whether it's emotional, physical, verbal, whatever, need to understand that what they received, as hard as this is to process, has nothing to do with them. It's the
Mhm.
other person's
Ooh, say
issues.
that again. Say that again and say it slower. That's so
Absolutely.
good.
Beautiful. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that resonated. When you get out of a toxic relationship, it is imperative to understand that all the things that that person threw at you, whether it was emotional, verbal, physical, all the abuse, you need to understand that none of that has anything to do with you. That's their own traumas. That's their own lack of integrity. That's their own lack of
Mm.
self-worth. And that in itself becomes a perpetual cycle because they know deep down, they're rotten at their core. Excuse me, at the core, they're also pure beings, right? Just to stick up for everybody at their core. But because of their circumstances, because of their life stories, because of their traumas, as I would call it, they behave
Mm.
the way that they are. So it's important to understand when we get out of toxic relationships, yes, it is imperative that we take personal responsibility for what we can control and we work on ourselves to improve ourselves before going back into any kind of relationship with anybody. Otherwise, we're going to keep picking up on the same patterns. But it's also imperative to have a little bit of empathy for that other person to know that they're not narcissistic because they want to be. It's
Mhm.
their byproduct of their life circumstances that led them to be how they are. And all of the stuff they did and spewed at you is their insecurities and their traumas that they need to sit down and look in the mirror about.
Keyword they. Keyword they.
Yeah, your
They need
responsibility.
to. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's where you touched on it when you said like that hero or godlike complex or broken wing or whatever you want to call it, wounded bird. I've heard it so many different ways where it's like I feel like because my empathy for their situation, right? And with the Jennifer and Christian, he has been in jail and he's had a hard life and he's overcome it. And maybe if I can just be the strong woman, it's also to me no coincidence that there's this huge age gap and she's so much older. You know, it's all of these things, right? So if I can just love this person the way they haven't been loved,
right,
then maybe they will change and be better.
right.
And then a month goes by, 2 months goes by, a year goes by, a wedding has happened, and now you are seemingly feeling stuck in this relationship and hoping for change that has not happened yet. All right, let's hit the topic head on. Okay, people are struggling with boundaries because people are carrying guilt and shame with setting them firm, following up with them. This is something that I struggled with, especially if it's a family member. You're being hurt over and over. You see that it's a pattern. The relationship is not serving you, but you don't want to do what you know you need to do because you're afraid that you may hurt them or you may get guilt tripped or what are they going to think of me? How do people like set boundaries?
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. And I part of me wants to talk about values and visions more, but I'm gonna leave that because that's part of it. But let's talk about needs and desires. If you want to
Okay.
set boundaries, you got to know what you want. That's such a
Mhm.
problem that comes up in almost everybody that I work with is they know what they have now is not what they want, but they don't actually know what they do want, which is going
Mhm.
to lead to actual confusion and suffering. So,
Mhm.
first and most importantly, is getting clear on your own needs and desires that have nothing to do with anybody else, but this is what I desire, this is what I need, and this is what I'm entitled to as a human being, right? So
Mhm.
first of all, getting clear on what your needs and desires are, and then being able to communicate it from we practice nonviolent communication. I don't know if that's
Okay.
something you're
Ooh, I love
familiar
that.
with. Yeah, nonviolent communication. It's founded by an amazing man named Marshall Rosenberg, but it's a whole method that they have. And once you know what your needs and desires are, then you could present it to the person you're setting boundaries up. And that's not just a romantic partner, right? That could be a parent, that could be a sibling, that could be a friend. When you're able to get clear on your own needs and desires, and then you could communicate it to the person in a non-threatening way. That's the thing. A lot of times people go to set up what a boundary is for them, and then
Mhm.
that leads to conflict because the other person takes it
Is
personal.
receiving it. Uh-huh.
Exactly. And then it becomes friction and a bigger thing. So then it's like just drop it and continue on. But when you get clear on your needs and desires, when you can express it in a way that the person's not threatened and their defense mechanism goes up, because as soon as that defensive mechanism goes up, that puts us into a fight or flight response. When our
Mhm.
fight and flight response is activated, a part of our brain called the Broca's area shuts down. And when that part shuts down, no new information is coming in. So you could
Mhm.
you could articulate your clearest boundaries, but as soon as that person's their Broca's shuts down and nothing's getting through there. So that's why
Mhm.
it's important to be able to communicate your boundaries in a non-threatening way. And you kind of let them know, like, hey, I love you. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this. Hey,
Mhm.
I'm taking responsibility for my needs and desires. I'm not asking for anything other than for you to respect me as I, validate my own needs and desires. And here are the ways that you could help honor my needs and desires as my partner, as my mother, as my friend.
Mhm.
And I'm being very clear with you. This is how you're going to help me, in my needs. And if you can't meet me there, it kind of
Oh,
speaks for itself, right?
that part.
Otherwise, yeah,
That part. You can't be afraid to have a non-negotiable, right? Like, and that is tied back into self-worth, because if you are operating off of a limited or lack, or I will never get better, or this is the best that I can get, or I don't deserve more, then when it comes to that part that you just said, if you don't then X, Y, and Z, then you've got to be able to follow through with the X, Y, and Z,
Mhm.
whatever that means for you, right?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And in the work that I do is I help people get so clear on their needs, their desires, their values, their visions. They get so clear on what all those things are that by the time they're able to fully express that to their partner in a relationship perspective now, when they're able to finally present them with all of that data that they put together through working with me, they know we're either going to make this work or it's
Hmm.
over. There's no second guessing, and I think
Hmm.
that's something that I really surprise people with is like someone recently just asked me on like on a discovery call of if they want to work with me. They're like, will you save my marriage? And I'm like 50-50. But I promise you, if you decide to separate, you'll have the peace of mind knowing
Yeah.
that you brought it all to the table. And
Yeah.
so that really resonated with them. And that's exactly
Powerful.
how I feel about it. Yeah. Yeah.
Powerful. Being coming out of the fog of confusion is priceless.
Mm,
Like, confusion is a tool of the enemy.
mm,
Confusion goes back into that fight, flight, or freeze. Add
yeah.
freeze to it, because there are a lot of people
Mm,
who are frozen and feel stuck
yeah.
because they're confused.
Yeah. Can I add a fourth?
Yeah.
There's another one that I think will resonate with the listener called Fawn.
Oh.
And that to fawn is so it's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn is to be, let me do this for you, let me help you, fawn becomes the over giver. If
Oh,
I could just do the laundry, if I could just have the house well, if
oh,
I could
man.
just, yeah, that's the
I
one
gotta write it
that's
down.
people away. Yeah, the fawn, and we all do that, right? Like on yeah, we all, and that's the one that I get where it's like, if I go into like a party and I'm like, next thing I know, I'm like, hey, how's it going? And, I just become this another version of me. And if I
Yeah.
really slow down and connect with myself, I realize how I just like go into this people pleasing,
Uh-huh. Oh,
on.
that's
Yeah,
a whole nother, oh my gosh. That's all, like, we could have done it just over those 4, right? Like, those,
absolutely.
the way that you show up in relationships based on the trauma that you're carrying is so important. So, like, if any takeaway, like, understanding that there's layers to this, right? You can't, it's as a fitness, well, I'm about to tie this in. You're a fitness trainer. I
Yeah,
can't just work on abs. I
exactly.
can't just work on arms. Like, it's a holistic approach. You can't just work on boundaries without touching self-esteem, self-worth, childhood trauma, getting back to the most basic, purest
Yeah,
form of yourself. There's layers to it.
yeah,
So if you are listening and you're like, I need help. Like, this sounds good. This is what I want to do. Been trying to do it myself, reading books on it, but like, I need help. Seth, where can they find you?
yeah. Find me on Instagram on my name. It's Seth, SETH, period Kaufman, KAUFMANN. And then my website is also sethkaufman.com. And I
Mhm.
love having calls. I love connecting with people. It's how I learn. It's just so pure and beautiful for me. And I'd love to do just like a 30-minute discovery call if anybody wants to drop in and just kind of schmooze and see if it's a good fit. And yeah.
Yeah, and he is going to meet you where you are, and he is going to touch every area of your life. He doesn't work in isolation, and I love connecting with people too. That's why I have this platform. It's so much fun. I didn't think I was going to like it. Brand new at it, but it's just so much fun just talking to different people who are in the business of helping, and their different perspectives. And I truly believe it's not a one size fits all. People need to find and connect with who they identify with. Yes, yes, yes. And so if you know where to find me, if you're wanting to work with a therapist and you're wanting to unpack some of the trauma, relationship trauma, I'm here as well. I'm also doing a special giveaway. Seth, I wrote my very first book. It was not easy. I wrote it twice because the first time God was like, nah, that's not what I told you to do. So I wrote it again, and I'm doing
Because
a
you
giveaway. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The obedience part, right? So if you are interested in getting your hands on a copy, I'm giving away a book. Check out my Instagram for ways to qualify for it. I want every one of you to have a beautiful, wonderful weekend. Check out Seth, rewatch this, share it with somebody you know who could benefit from this. And I will see you next week, Friday. If you're interested in sharing your testimony on my podcast, or if you're in the field of helping and you would like to guest appear on my podcast, hit me up. Hit me up. All right. Everybody have a good weekend. See ya.